Imagine the spiraling whirlwind your life would be thrown into after discovering that you weren't who you thought you were. There have been several cases of missing persons being found safe years later. Many are eventually informed that the people they called mom and dad were actually their kidnappers. A situation like this isn't easy to deal with, so it's easy to assume that when someone stumbles across the truth on their own and ends up solving their own missing persons case, it can be very hard to cope with the new information. These 5 people were faced with a similar dilemma after realizing they were the victims of living lives of lies. Number 5. 35-year-old software salesman Steve Carter was a Philadelphia resident when he found out that he was actually the victim of an unsolved missing persons case. In 2011, Steve heard the story of a young woman who believed she was adopted and found a photo of herself on a database of missing people. As far as Steve knew at the time, he was adopted in Honolulu after being given up by his biological mother. Still, he experienced some sort of gut instinct that told him to search the website for his own photo. Almost instantly after logging in to missingkids.com, Steve found a photo of himself. The younger photo immediately grabbed his attention. He said he was instantly positive that the child was him. This post also featured a side-by-side comparison photo from his childhood and an age progression photo created by digital investigators. As you'd expect, the new photo wasn't identical, but it was eerily similar enough for Steve to believe that it was him. After an understandable period of complete shock, Steve took the next step in solving his own case by contacting Honolulu law enforcement. In a later interview, Steve declined credit for solving his own case, stating that law enforcement did most of the legwork. The department was able to bring the case to a close, but Steve's work was not over yet. He submitted a DNA sample to find out more about his past, and after 8 grueling months of waiting, he was given new details about his past life. Apparently, his birth name was Marks Panama Moriarty Barnes, and his parents were Marks Barnes and Charlotte Moriarty. About 30 years before, his mother took him out for a walk but returned home without him. His father reported him missing and lived with worry for decades. The exact series of events are unclear, and there's no confirming evidence to suggest that Charlotte was at fault. However, Steve stated that his mother dropped him off at an orphanage under a fake name because she didn't want to be a mother anymore. Again, that's unconfirmed. Steve worked hard to solve his own case, and the truth was eventually revealed. In a 2012 interview, Steve said that he would like to build a relationship with his blood relatives sometime in the future. Number 4. 32-year-old Carlina White, also known as Nettie Nance, is an American woman who solved her own kidnapping 23 years after she was abducted as an infant. Carlina's parents took her to the emergency room when she was just 19 days old because she had a respiratory infection that caused her fever to spike. Carlina's parents, Joy White and Carl Tyson, put their faith into doctors' hands by trusting their daughter would be safe at the hospital. Unfortunately, that was a mistake. A woman dressed as a nurse visited the parents frequently throughout their stay and even provided them with emotional support when Carlina was recovering. Later, it was revealed that the woman was not an employee of the hospital at all and had been lurking around the property for about 3 weeks before the abduction. One night between 2:30 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., while Carlina was receiving antibiotic treatment via an IV drip, the mysterious woman snuck into her room while nurse shifts were changing to avoid being noticed and removed the IV before taking the infant. The hospital did own a surveillance system, but of course it wasn't operating that night. A guard confirmed seeing a woman that matched the suspect description scurry out of the hospital. He claimed he didn't see an infant in her arms though, but she could have hidden the baby under her large clothing. Carlina was being raised by the woman that stole her from her parents' loving arms, known as Ann Petway. They lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut for most of her youth, just 45 miles from her birth parents. Eventually, they moved to Atlanta, Georgia after Carlina finished school. Carlina stated that she always had her suspicion about Ann because she was never able to provide a birth certificate or social security card during her life. In 2005, Carlina got pregnant and urged her mother to give her a birth certificate so she could enroll for health insurance. Ann somehow managed to obtain a forged Connecticut birth certificate. Officials informed Carlina after she tried to use the document that it was forged. Carlina was confused and shocked and confronted Ann and demanded answers. Ann broke down and told Carlina that she had been given up by her drug-addicted birth mother. Some time passed before Carlina decided she wanted to know more about her past and test the truth behind Ann's story. When she was 23, she visited an online database for missing and exploited children. While scrolling through the photos, she found an infant photo that resembled her own baby photos. Additionally, the photos shared traits with Carlina's own daughter. She was convinced that the infant was her, and she called the center's hotline. Later, the case was closed as it was considered solved. Carlina submitted her DNA for testing, and the results confirmed that she was the missing child. With the help of the hotline, she was able to locate her birth parents. She was reunited with her family, and her abductor was later charged with kidnapping and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Number 3. Over 30 years ago, in September of 1986, a man named Edgar Tulip vanished. The last time his mother saw him was when she visited him in the hospital after the then 21-year-old tried taking his own life. After that, Edgar vanished from his hometown of Kitchener, Ontario, leaving behind all of his belongings and identification documents. His mother reported him missing after a few days, and police were informed that he was developmentally delayed and had mental health challenges. Those details added a thick layer of urgency to the search and the case, seeing as they put Edgar at risk. To make matters even worse, police discovered that Edgar had left his medication behind, making him not only a threat to himself but possibly others as well. The first theory of the investigation was that Edgar was headed to Niagara Falls because it was a popular location for individuals trying to end their own lives. No sign of Edgar was ever found at the falls or along the route there. According to reports later shared by Edgar, shortly after leaving town, he suffered some sort of a head injury and forgot his own identity. He somehow managed to build a new life in St. Catharines, Ontario, despite no proof of his citizenship or identity. However, officers did choose to not release those details. In 2016, Edgar allegedly began experiencing flashbacks and puzzle pieces of his memory suddenly came rushing in. He contacted a social worker to report that he was a missing man. He then worked with Niagara Regional Police to learn more details about his disappearance and family. A voluntary DNA test confirmed Edgar's identity, and he later met with family during a happy yet emotional reunion. The Missing Children's Network described the case as incredible and used the story as a heartwarming example to see why these databases and investigations never give up hope for missing children. It's also amazing that despite his mental setbacks and the result of his head injury, Edgar was able to work with police to finally solve the case 30 years after his disappearance. Number 2. When it comes to kidnapping, the common assumption is that a sick, twisted, or disturbed stranger sneakily snatches a child from their home. That's not the case in every kidnapping, though. It's actually very possible for children to be kidnapped by their own relatives, even a parent. Julian Hernandez was 19 years old when he found out his father had kidnapped him as a child. In August of 2002, Julian's mother reported him missing. His father, Bobby Hernandez, had come to the mother's home in Birmingham, Alabama to babysit him. But instead, he took Julian and left the state. The only information he gave the boy's mother was a short note saying that he had taken the child. He traveled to Cleveland, Ohio, and created new identities for both he and his son. Bobby obtained a fake driver's license that displayed the name Jonathan Mangina, and Julian assumed the nickname JJ. The truth was uncovered when Julian began applying for colleges during his senior year of high school. A school counselor noticed that the social security number Julian provided brought up an alert that he was kidnapped in 2002. Julian took the reins and began investigating his own kidnapping. He called Birmingham police and brought the news to the surface, inevitably solving his own case. His father was arrested shortly after in November of 2015. During court, Bobby broke down in tears as he apologized to his son and tried to explain his motives, stating that Julian was the most important person in his life. The judge stated that Bobby deprived his son of a relationship with his mother, and he was charged for 4 years in prison during April of 2016, followed by a 5-year supervised release. Julian argued before the sentence was handed down that it was painful growing up without a mother, but that he loved his father unconditionally and forgave him for his actions. Julian claimed that he still wanted his father in his life, and putting him in jail would ultimately be the same thing as depriving him of a mother. Julian later met his mother and they spent holidays together. And as of now, there have been no updates on the case as to whether his father has been released or not. But it's nice to think that Julian is working through the family conflicts to have both of his parents in his life. Number 1. In 1991, a toddler named Soon Bin was abducted from a vegetable market in the province of Sichuan, China. The boy's father, Sun Yuhong, and his mother dropped all responsibilities to search for their beloved child. They organized search groups, scored the land, and posted flyers all over the place, even outside of their hometown. Sadly, they never found their child, and law enforcement declared the child was presumed dead. His parents never believed that to be true, though. Soon Bin was taken to a coastal town thousands of miles from his home and sold to a family that desperately wanted a child of their own. Soon Bin attended school until he was 15, when he was put to work as an electrician. Soon Bin knew that he was adopted his whole life, and despite burning questions, he never bothered asking his parents about his origins. The itch to learn more about his family grew over the years, though, and he finally submitted a DNA sample to the police network. A short while later, a match was found, and Soon Bin confirmed that he was a kidnapped child. A website in China that helps reunite families, known as Baby Come Home, also played a role in helping Soon Bin solve his own case. He was later reunited with his father, but sadly his mother had passed away. While Soon Bin shared a feeling of uncertainty regarding his adopted parents, his biological father was furious that they'd accepted a kidnapped baby. However, he agreed that if his then 28-year-old biological son would come home to live with him, he wouldn't press charges. Soon Bin agreed to spend some time living with his father, but it's unclear if he decided to stay there permanently. While this case is closed as far as the missing toddler's whereabouts, the identity of his kidnappers remains unknown. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos. And if you enjoyed this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/ty_knots.